Hi and welcome everyone to our online event Gamecity Forecast on AI in game production. I'm Johannes from Gamecity Hamburg, and with me are also my colleagues Dennis and Anna, who will be joining me in moderating this session tonight. First, a quick word about us. Gamecity Hamburg is a publicly funded initiative that aims to improve the conditions for the local games industry here in Hamburg, Germany. We support the industry with funding, networking events, and events for the exchange of knowledge like this one. And we started the series Gamecity Forecast to discuss about trends and developments that will impact the games industry as a whole. And we'd like to exchange opinions and ideas with people from different companies, from different places, from different industries. And we're very happy that this worked today because this topic drew a lot of attention and a lot of registrations from people around the world. So thanks everyone for joining in and sharing your thoughts and discussion ideas in the discussion later on. And of course, there's a reason behind this interest. AI, and especially generative AI, is on everyone's lips right now. For months, you've seen it in the news media, your LinkedIn feed, industry journals, and the consensus is most of the time the use of AI tools will change a lot, especially in the ways we work. And the games industry has always been one to embrace new ways of working and new technologies, but there's also a lot of questions, challenges, and barriers to be cleared up. So tonight we want to dive deeper into this discussion and see how AI-powered tools will change the way we approach making games. And we're very happy that we have a guest expert on that. Tonight will be joining us Matt Dion, who is, among other things, a contributor for the industry newsletter Narvik, and he's been looking at AI in game production for quite some time now. So next up, he will give a quick overview and thought starters about what uses are there already today for AI in game production and what will probably become possible in the near future. Afterwards, we'll have a Q&A session and discussion with our live audience. This won't be in this video as we don't record it, but without much further ado, I'll hand over the mic to Matt for his talk on AI in game production.
Thank you all for doing those intros. That was really great. And it's great that we have people from all over the world. We have people coming from different disciplines in game development and outside of games entirely. It's really fantastic. So I'm looking forward to sort of the discussions to follow. I will do my best to keep this within 20-25 minutes so we have time for Q&A at the end. But if I'm running short on time, just put a message in the chat. And you'll see me looking off to the left. I have another monitor over here, so I'm paying attention. I just have my materials on the side. So we're going to talk about AI in game production. You see here in the image, I think what a lot of kind of the narrative around AI in game production is. It's like, we're going to do everything with AI and it's going to change the world. And I'm here to tell you that that's partially true, in my opinion. I think that it has so many applications, many of which we'll get into, but there's also limitations, of course. So I want this to be kind of a measured discussion. By the way, the person saying that quote, his name is Emmanuel. He runs a generative AI company called Scenario.gg. Fascinating tool. I'll probably touch on it a little bit later. So I'm going to kind of give a quick overview on the topic of AI in game development. We'll talk about what's possible today and what's going to be possible tomorrow across a variety of stages of game development. And I'll try and touch on different disciplines. So, we'll talk a little bit about art, we'll talk a little bit about community, we'll talk about product and so on. We'll end with some key takeaways and we'll set up some future challenges and parting thoughts for us to take into the discussion groups. And of course, we'll leave time for Q&A. So very quickly, you heard a little bit about me. I'm a product manager by training. I've been in the industry for about 10 years. Currently, I am working with a group called Narvik. Narvik does a newsletter called the Narvik Digest. They also do the Narvik Gaming Podcast, among other things. And that was sort of my exposure to AI in game development, was researching it for this group that I work with. They're fantastic. Also, they have at least some of their members in Germany. So worth checking out if you haven't checked out some of their materials. But in the past, I've worked as a game developer as well. I worked at EA a couple of times at Industrial Toys, which is the studio that was working on Battlefield Mobile until very recently. I worked at PopCap, which makes the Plants vs. Zombies franchise. I also worked at Gamecity and Pocket Gems, which are also two mobile gaming studios, more in the casual space. Also, you'll see this Always Scheming logo. That's my blog. So, it's not a gaming company. It is my own publication. And I'm here as a representative of Always Scheming. So without further ado, AI will upend many industries. You've, I'm sure, seen this in your own experience. The adoption of some of these tools has been absolutely incredible. If you look at, ChatGPT reached 1 million users in, I think, like a week, something insane like that. And on the right here, we have a chart of Stable Diffusion adoption among developers. So this is from stats taken from GitHub. Stable Diffusion, if you're not aware, is one of the algorithms that underlies a lot of the text-to-image generators. So like a vertical adoption curve. Really, really incredible. And it's going to change a lot of things in a lot of industries, but I think gaming will be one of the ones that is the most impacted. This is a chart from Andreessen Horowitz, their games fund, and their take, which I tend to agree with, is that the combination of interactive elements as well as different types of media, 3D modeling, 2D images, audio, animations, these will all be impacted in one way or another by generative AI. And the impact, we believe, will be far greater than that, which we'll see in other forms of media. So to be clear, we're talking mostly about generative AI, which is different from other forms of AI that you may have encountered in the past or heard about. Generative AI makes new content based on inputs of existing content. Whereas something like, for example, procedural generation, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that is making new content. Sorry, it's not making new content. It's making a different kind of arrangement of existing content, as opposed to making something entirely new that hasn't existed before. There are probably folks who are far more technical than I that could go into the details of generative AI versus adversarial networks or deep learning, or the different sort of iterations on that. I am not technical, admittedly, but I'll do my best to talk about some of the pros and cons here. So, what is generative AI really good at? It's good at first pass content creation, right? You want to make something really quickly, get past the kind of blank page wall, if you will. It will create something very quickly for you to then iterate and work with. It also benefits from the flexibility of textual inputs. So most people are familiar with, ChatGPT or DALL-E, where you type in a prompt and it spits out some, new piece of content. However, text can take many forms, right? So it could be a natural language query, but it could also be dialogue. You and I are having a conversation, or maybe I'm having a conversation with an NPC character in a game. It could be narrative exposition. It could even be code snippets. So I would encourage you to sort of think about the flexibility of text as an input. And of course, speed and consistency. This image on the right is an example of how quickly and how consistently a fine-tuned model can output new content within a specific style. Of course, there are weaknesses to these tools as well, some of which I'm sure you've encountered in your own experience. These models require fine-tuning. They can be highly generic, if not given some additional parameters and, say, negative prompts or ways to kind of narrow down the space. They, of course, hallucinate is what they call it. They are very good at sounding confident and delivering an answer that sounds correct. However, there have been some groups, and by the way, the sources will be in the notes of this presentation, which we'll share out. There are some groups that estimate up to 20% inaccuracy with AI, which, it works for ChatGPT because it's like sort of a proof of concept tool. It's very early, but in practical application, 20% inaccuracy rate is not great. It's really not acceptable in a lot of industries. Of course, they lack real-time information. These models were trained at a snapshot in time, and anything beyond that, they do not have a frame of reference for. You can see in the screenshot here, I attempted to get around that. ChatGPT was trained in 2021. It has no knowledge of 2022 and beyond. And then, of course, the training data bias. These models are only going to be as good as the data that they are trained on. And so there are questions there around, where does that data come from? Does it come from artists who have maybe not agreed to supply their creative works as training data? Or does it come from all one race or one religion or one country? You know, there's bias inherent in some of these data sets, and it's important to be aware of that bias and its impacts on the outputs of these models. So as I said, we're going to talk about different applications across the development pipeline. I've roughly bucketed it into 4 sections. So we'll start with concepting and prototyping, and we'll talk about what we can do today. So, you know, at a high level, generative AI is really good at democratizing inspiration across a studio organization or a gaming organization. I am not an artist, but I am able to quickly create beautiful art, what I think is beautiful art, from these generative AI tools. And lowering those barriers allows non-technical or non-creative developers to bring their ideas to life far more quickly, and it democratizes this concepting function across the entire organization. Of course, it's great for concept art. I'm glad that we have a concept artist here who can tell me if I'm completely off base here, but it's helpful in my experience to really hone in on things like a color palette or just an aesthetic direction overall. Of course, they're not perfect. They require the intervention of professionals at times, but it helps you, again, get past the blank page and get started down a path that you are satisfied with, rather than wasting a bunch of time or money or effort getting what you really have in your head. And then marketability testing. I think this is an interesting application where you can use some of these concepts and put them out into the market and see how they are received. Because you're saving time generating the art, you can quickly test a lot of different concepts. So this is often used in things like hyper-casual games or user acquisition to quickly get an idea of, if we make a game that looks in this theme, it has this style, how do our target audience receive that? Do they click through? Are they interested? Do they sign up to a form? So I think that's an interesting application for today. Of course, some examples here. You can even go from a sketch to a full image. You can imagine how powerful this could be, not for just everyday game developers, but for children who are still developing their artistic talent. Really sort of inspiring people to be creative at a young age. I think this is really interesting. What else? We can do rapid prototyping. Again, getting past the blank page and getting from 0 to 1. Especially when you're a small studio, the faster you can go from idea to results and then pivot based off of the data that you're getting, the better off you'll be as a small business with a limited runway, right? You only have so much time and so much money to spend. It's important to get results quickly. On the right here, you can see an example of this guy happens to be a venture capitalist who spent a bit of time with ChatGPT and Midjourney and made a card game with his kids. You know, that's really incredible, right? Used to be this sort of thing would take a long time and require expert assistance. On the left is an example. I forget the name, but I have it in the sources. It's a Japanese horror game done in the style of a visual novel. It's all 2D images that were created with AI. So you can get really quickly to a prototype stage and really quickly learn something. So what's going to be possible tomorrow? I think I heard someone say we have they're working in VR, and I think this is interesting here. So these screenshots here are from a tool called Promethean AI, where they're showing off what they can do in VR, and they have a voice to 3D scene tool, basically, where the wearer of the headset provides a prompt with their voice, and then he says, "Build me a modern downtown office," and then boom, they have an office, and then you can quickly change aspects of that scene. I suspect this is, quite early, still sort of a prototype, but I mean, a voice to an interactive scene, that's a huge step forward. We could also go text to playable prototype potentially. I think this could really start to appear in places with robust data sets, training data sets, like big publishers, for example. I think we're still a ways away from getting there, but could be very interesting in the future. Yes, holodeck, exactly. I've actually seen that referenced in a number of AI gaming company materials. Definitely an inspiration for a lot of builders in this space. Okay, so design and pre-production. What are we talking about today? You can do world building really easily. give ChatGPT a prompt. We want to create a world that takes place in this time with these characteristics, and it will spit out an entire story or history for you. You can generate lore and characters and locations and really just kind of fill in the gaps for a vague idea that you might have. I talked a little bit about procedural generation versus generative AI, creating a completely new a set of content as opposed to a redistribution of existing pieces. You could actually use procedural generation as the inputs to a generative AI model. So, procedural generation, the most common example is like Minecraft, right? So Minecraft creates a map with its random, semi-random procedural generation. You can use something like that, the output of that, as an input into an AI model. So it learns how to distribute certain parcels of land or resources or whatever, but it creates them also entirely new. Maybe it's new tile sets, new textures, new arrangements. I think this is a really interesting application and totally possible today. Model fine tuning. So that's what you see in the top right here. You can see some generators that I've created. I mentioned a tool called Scenario earlier. This is a tool that allows you to upload your own training images, create a generator with their tool, and then generate endless images with your own training data set. So this idea of fine-tuning your own model is really powerful and completely possible today. Style transfer is what you see in this bottom image here, kind of quickly taking sort of the structure of an image and swapping it out with a different style altogether. This is, I think this image, I'm trying to remember when I was doing my research, I think it's from Frankfurt. It's definitely in Germany. And then they swapped it with like a Van Gogh style, as you can see. And then documentation, being able to quickly generate text. If you feed ChatGPT, let's say an outline of a feature that you're building as a product manager or a game designer, it will write, you can tell it to write you a game design document or a tech brief or, a product requirements document or something like that. And of course, this gets more powerful over time as you sort of provide better training data. I think we'll start to see, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but we'll start to see tools that can create new documents based off of a training data set of internal documents. So you feed a model all of your features from all of the games you've built over the years, and then it understands the format that you like to use and how those are written, and can create them from scratch. All right, so what's going to be possible tomorrow? Let's see if this video works. This is another example of style transfer. Scaled style transfer is what I'm calling it. You go from text to a new style across all sorts of 3D models. I thought this was really interesting. This video comes from NVIDIA, by the way. So this is something they're building into their Omniverse tool set. Also text to systems like, a weather system or a driving system or what have you. This screenshot is from Roblox. It just came out like 2-3 days ago. Actually, they made a big announcement that Roblox is going to be incorporating generative AI tools into their platform, which, I mean, that's a massive company implementing a massive new technology. Really interesting to see what happens there. What else? We can go text to level generator. So on the right, you see something called Mario GPT. They provide text inputs and it generates a Mario level just based off of that. Now, these are concepts, by the way. I think these will be fleshed out in much greater detail tomorrow and into the future. On the left, you see something called Boxoban. One of these is a training input, and one of these is created by the AI. And you really can't tell the difference. I think it's the one on the left was the training input, but the point being, it's pretty powerful already. And you can imagine extrapolating this out into the future. What kind of levels or environments or 3D spaces could be generated with just a text input when it's trained on some really powerful training data. I think you can actually push those boxes, but I might be wrong. Production. Okay, so once you start building your game, what can you do with generative AI? Of course, image and texture generation. We've all seen image generation, so I won't spend much time on that. But you can also generate textures for the environments in your game or different assets. It's a similar idea. It's still a 2D image, that you're generating with AI. You can also generate all sorts of backgrounds and skyboxes. There are a number of tools that do this already. AI-enabled emergent gameplay. I probably should have put this in the tomorrow section as well, but there's a one game, for example, called AI Dungeon. Has been around for a few years now, and it's basically a personalized Dungeons and Dragons type experience where you are putting in text inputs, and you're basically conversing with the dungeon master, if you will, that is controlled by AI. They've since included, I think, Midjourney into their game, to where there are now images as well as text that comes back based on the sort of adventure that you're having in the game. So AI is completely enabling this gameplay. And I think we'll start to see more instances of this in the future. And then, of course, we've got smarter chatbots and NPCs. There are a lot of companies working in this space right now. This image on the right is from a company called In-World AI, where they're working on creating bots or NPCs that have personalities, they have backstories, they have memories that they can reference when they're creating new bits of conversation, emotions and relations to other characters. These are things that can be kind of programmed into their, I guess, training data to make them more believable and more smart. So what's going to be possible in the future? Text to 3D asset is still very early right now, but that is where we're going to be going for sure as we start to have a desire to fill up 3D environments with generative AI. So for sure, that's where this is going. Code generation. This is a big one and really kind of blew my mind when I first learned about it. You can create code as a non-technical person. Say, hey, ChatGPT, write me a script that will do XYZ. And it will work. It might not be the best code, certainly for those of you who are engineers or who are more technically minded. You'll, I'm sure, see errors in the code. But again, the idea here is going from 0 to 1. For non-technical people, it's a huge unlock. But for people who are technical, it can make them much more productive and efficient in the coding that they do because they know the right questions to ask the tools. And there are some examples of this already. Replit does a tool called Ghostwriter. GitHub has Copilot. These are AI generative tools for assisting with programming. So this is really, it's possible today, and it's going to improve tomorrow. Of course, AI-enabled customization. You can make profile pictures or avatars with AI, characters that are more personalized to the player's experience. And then QA bots. This is something that actually happens already, but it will improve certainly as generative AI improves, creating different bots that will play your game and look for ways to break it or find bugs in different ways and do so rapidly, right? QA is already a very difficult job. So if we can scale that and make it more efficient, that will be a big unlock for studios. What else is going to be possible tomorrow in production? Game engine integration. So I talked about Roblox already. Surely Unity and Unreal are working on this in their own environments. As we start to get these incorporated into game engines, it will just democratize game development even further. AI-enabled emergent gameplay. So yeah, I mentioned this earlier. Just the other day, Microsoft announced that Minecraft is going to be integrating AI, or at least they're working on a prototype that does this, where you can provide a text prompt, build me the Empire State Building, and it will create it in Minecraft. Now, I haven't seen any images of this. This was just announced the other day, but it's an example of where things are going with these tools. Similarly, smarter chatbots and NPCs. So NetEase, Chinese game publisher, just announced the other day as well, they're integrating ChatGPT into a forthcoming mobile MMO game that they're building. So big companies are already doing this. And we're going to start to see the results, I think, fairly soon. I realize I'm going fast here because I'm running short on time, so I apologize. What's possible today in live ops and support? So player support chatbots. Again, there are many companies working in the chatbot space. You see a small sampling of them here. These chatbots will get smarter through the use of generative AI. They'll be able to use natural language and understand natural language better than the chatbots that are in use today. This can also be applied to marketing and community management. So whether it's Discord moderators or it is putting out content or assets very quickly, generative AI can really help with that. It can also help to improve the writing quality across your organization, particularly if English is not the native language for people who are responsible for writing content that's going to go out to your community, you're basically lifting the quality bar higher than it might have been otherwise. Of course, if you're a skilled writer, you're going to recognize that some of this stuff, as I said earlier, can be quite generic. So it's helpful to have human intervention, of course, but this is what's possible today. It will improve. And then UA creative production, I touched on this a little bit earlier, being able to rapidly create images. Eventually we'll get to video as well with generative AI for testing in UA environments. What's going to be possible tomorrow? So I mentioned code generation. You can also generate code like SQL, for example. It's a database like querying language. So in this way, you can democratize access to your game's data across your game studio to people who may not necessarily be technical. So typically it's data analysts or product managers that are looking at the game data. Now you can provide access to designers, to engineers, to anyone that is interested in learning more. And there are tools that are doing that. You can see a screenshot of one on the right here. Of course, we can also optimize offers to players through generative AI, creating different combinations of consumables and cosmetics and whatever you're selling in your game in interesting ways based on player data that's coming in. Now, as it stands today, you can do this, but it's very manual. It requires a whole cycle of analysis and then creating new offers and putting them in the game and getting them approved to the App Store and whatnot. This will speed up with generative AI, in my opinion. And similarly, personalized onboarding experiences based on the training data that the model is fed from previous players. You can, in theory, offer personalized experiences to new players coming into the game. Maybe we'll introduce this feature first, or we'll give them this tutorial second based on the way that they are playing. All right, so we're into key takeaways here. I'm going to go through 4 quick quotes that I think illustrate what we're talking about here. So number 1, personalized gameplay content. You've heard me talk about this quite a bit already. This is Ben Thompson from Stratechery. And basically what he's saying here is that generative AI is how we create the metaverse. Now, I haven't really said the metaverse word because that's like an entirely different talk, really. But if we take that to be sort of an end state, AI is the way that we get there, creating content at 0 marginal cost that is fully customizable to the individual. Takeaway number 2, the quality bar increases at AAA as well. You may have heard some takes that are like, well, now we can, with generative AI, everyone can make, Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption because we'll be able to create assets really quickly. But Strauss Zelnick, CEO of Take-Two, that makes those games, his take was interesting in that if it's lifting the quality bar at the bottom of the industry, it's also going to lift the quality bar at the top of the industry. The best developers will be able to do more. They'll be able to be more creative and create more expansive virtual worlds. Takeaway number 3, AI will be a differentiating factor. I believe this to be true. Mark Cuban here also believes it to be true. As he says, there's 2 types of companies, those who are great at AI and everybody else. This will be a real unlock for both the individual contributors and the organizations as a whole that learn to use these tools because it will increase efficiency. It will increase the quality bar, as we just talked about. It will really change the way that companies operate, and the faster that you can learn these tools and incorporate them into your workflows, I think the better off you'll be. And then finally, every domain will be impacted. We touched on this earlier, right? So this is Jensen Huang from NVIDIA. He's basically saying what I was mentioning earlier, that right now we can do 2D images, we can do videos. Pretty soon you'll be able to do it for entire villages, 3D villages and landscapes and cities and so on, generate an entire 3D world. This is where we're going, in my opinion. And we're not there yet, but it's changing rapidly, as I'm sure you've seen. So here's just a summary of the key takeaways. Delivery of increasingly personalized experiences. We'll see new emergent gameplay unlocked by these AI tools. Of course, increased efficiency, meaning an increased quality bar at the high end. And of course, there will be an increasing amount of generic garbage at the bottom, unfortunately, which the implication there is not only do we see increased quality at the high end, but there is now an emphasis on discovery and how do you find the best of the generic stuff. Of course, the ability to work effectively with AI tools would be a differentiating factor for talented developers. And then we'll start to see domain-specific solutions across all disciplines of game development. There will be stuff just for art, stuff just for analytics and product management, tools for UA, tools for video creation, all of it, level design, everything will be in. So some future challenges before we wrap up. IP enforcement, of course. How do you stop someone from using one of these tools to create Spider-Man or Mickey Mouse or whatever in without having the rights to do that? This is going to be a challenge for sure. Deepfakes, I'm sure you've heard about. The ability to create an altered image that looks very realistic using AI tools. This is something that's, you can just go on YouTube and see that's already happening. An unclear legal and regulatory environment. Who is enforcing creator protections, who is deciding what is legal to do with AI and what is not. I'm sure this will be different from country to country and state to state. It's very early, and my experience in America, I'm sure, is similar to yours in Europe, which is that politicians are not usually the most technically savvy of individuals, and so it will take them a while to figure out the best way to handle this. So we can talk about some of this stuff in the breakout groups, but that is my presentation. I apologize if it was a bit rushed, but thank you all for listening, and I hope that you learned something. I'll take any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. That was really, really interesting, and it was a ride through all the things. Thank you so much for that.